Luke Skywalker, Frodo Baggins, Neo, Captain Kirk, Spock, Solid Snake, Optimus Prime, Goku, Rick Grimes, the Doctor, Joel, and Ellie. I could continue on to practically infinity, but the point I'm trying to make by listing these select household names from film, television, literature, comics, and video games is the instant connections the brain makes when registered. These names are the representatives of beloved franchises from all over the world. Moreover, these names and others typically evoke the strongest emotional responses of their respective franchises. This is because character can be what separates good stories from great ones. Characters are the vehicles through which readers, viewers, and gamers become familiar with the world and its story. The characters are equally as essential to the power of any story as the story itself. I'm a diehard believer that the best stories have the best characters. A writer could have $1 million idea and that idea go bankrupt because the characters lack the proper dimensionality. While vast world building, extensive lore, exhaustive research, and century-spanning plots can take on lives of their own, becoming characters in themselves, the value of these pursuits within creative writing pales in comparison to layered character building, in my opinion. If a writer wants the reader to fall in love with their world, they first need to get the reader to fall in love with their characters. This brings us to part 3 of my comic book making workshop series, Creating My First Comic. We've identified our idea in part 1 and fleshed out our story in part 2, but none of that matters if we can't mold relatable, interesting, and compelling players to run around in our imaginary playgrounds. As with the first 2 installments in this series, we'll be dissecting the first 2 volumes of my Supernatural Slice of Life series Seasons. In this newsletter, we'll be specifically examining the main cast from both volumes and walking through their creation process. With Seasons Volume 3 Fall on the horizon, the first 2 volumes, Spring and Summer, will be getting second printings in trade paperback format in 2025, so please sign up to be notified when the Kickstarter campaign launches and pre-orders are open. This series can only survive with your support, and our goal is to reach 250 followers before we go live. And now, let's begin with the main character of Seasons, Fletcher Hart Ames. Seasons rests on the shoulders of Fletcher. Without him, there is no story, no series. Seasons is told from his sole perspective and no one else's. And if he's not likable, or if he's not someone the reader can root for, then there's no reason for them to continue reading. This is a tall order, but one I was willing to take on. Character-driven stories are generally my cup of tea, and in the realm of comic books, being able to get into the head of a character using inner monologues from a first-person perspective was where I was most comfortable at the time, thanks primarily to writers like Ed Brubaker. Flipping through the first 2 volumes, the bulk of Seasons is reading Fletcher's thoughts. It's plain to see that finding Fletcher's voice took priority over finding his look or fine-tuning his interactions with the world and other characters. This was done because inner monologue narration allows the reader to spend time with the character and understand a character more efficiently in ways that visual storytelling cannot. Human beings are always thinking, and the mind is unfathomably complex. For an insular character like Fletcher, this narrative tool that graphic storytelling provides showcases his over-analytical mind and romantic heart. It also allows readers to embody him, in a sense, and experience life through his eyes, as well as all of the extraordinary events he comes across. Since this was my first comic book writing venture, my first time writing a full-length story, there's a lot of me in Fletcher. Writers must fight the urge to self-insert as much as possible, but the line between self-insertion and authentic lived experience can get blurry. Write what you know was my mantra. I knew what it was like to be a young, depressed single male who hated himself, who was afraid of himself, and that's what I chose to write about. To this day, I'm proud that I did, because this vulnerability I decided to share has left its mark on readers. My advice for writers just starting out would be to write what you know, but also realize that what you know might not be much, and so expanding that knowledge with research and continual observation of humanity will make you a better, more well-rounded storyteller. Self-insertion can be a starting point for your characters, but it cannot be the whole character. These tendencies must be buried underneath a character discovered outside yourself, which is what I tried to do with Fletcher. I'm not as attractive as he is, I'm not estranged from my family, I don't have a younger brother, I didn't have a coworker I fell in love with. I don't want to have a career in construction. I've never been homeless, etc. I've noted that the plot of Seasons and the character of Fletcher are inseparable. On the surface, he appears to be a regular guy in his early 20s. Yet, Fletcher is on a quest for a meaningful life, and the series aims to uncover what that means for him. In light of this, I needed to know what mattered to Fletcher, what motivated him, and where he got off track from pursuing a life filled with purpose. Was it a specific point in time, or was it a gradual decline? How does someone realize they are in a bad place? How does someone awaken to a new reality? How does someone realize their full potential? The interrogation of Fletcher as a character began, and it evolved, establishing his backstory, his relationship with his family, his love life, and his mental health. There are allusions to these foundational aspects of his character throughout the first 3 issues/chapters of the series, but it's not until the 4th and final issue of Seasons Volume 1 Spring where we leave no stone unturned. It's at this point where the reader is privy to Fletcher's self-diagnosis of needing to change. This is the thread Seasons Volume 2 Summer then picks up, as Fletcher must learn that he's not alone in his quest and the following steps to take regarding how to change. And in Seasons Volume 3 Fall, Fletcher will attempt to implement those changes. Next up is the Shadow Self. Fletcher's Shadow Self is the other side of the coin. He is a mirror. He is all action and no thought. This speaks to every Shadow Self in Seasons Volume 1 Spring, and there are a lot of them, but Fletcher's Shadow Self acts as a twofold narrative instrument. Firstly, he represents the subconscious of Fletcher and gives voice to everything Fletcher is unwilling to admit to others and to himself. He's what cannot be shown or told if we were just following Fletcher's day-to-day. Secondly, he represents what a Shadow Self is in the role of Shadow Selves throughout the first volume. He reveals to Fletcher another layer of himself and of the human race. He is the antagonist of Seasons Volume 1 Spring, but he's also the key to resolving the first story arc and unlocking the rest of the series. Full disclosure, I was completely oblivious to the Jungian psychological concept of the shadow when writing the first volume of Seasons. I swear on my life, the true story of how this idea came to me was because I found watching my own shadow fascinating. This darkness was always following me wherever I went. It became a visual metaphor for another side of the self that can never be shaken off. It wasn't until I started collaborating with the artist of the series, Anthony Gonzalez Clark, that he brought Carl Jung's articulation of the shadow to my attention. As I dug deeper into the concept, it only bolstered my confidence that the idea of dark side entities manifesting themselves, which is not an original idea, mind you, actually worked perfectly for the story I was trying to tell. The idea of literal shadow selves walking amongst the earth was tapping into something more profound than I thought, and henceforth I could sound smarter and more well-read than I was in fact. On a visual level, the use of shadows and shadow-like figures presented plenty of opportunities for Anthony to play around. This was an added bonus and fell right into Anthony's skill set with blacks, whites, and grayscale. Seasons was never meant to be a black and white comic, but after seeing Anthony's artwork, I saw no reason to seek out a colorist. If the book were to be colored, the shadow selves were meant to carry a purplish glow to them mixed in with the black. This is reflected on fully colored promotional artwork. Early on, I described the shadow selves to Anthony like so as recorded on a visual reference sheet. Quote, "Their color scheme should appear like a purplish black hole. Parts of their bodies can be more transparent than other parts at different times depending on your touch, but they should be transparent/translucent every time we see them to convey the idea that people's emotions are also transparent. They are living, breathing shadows." Unquote. Next is Kathleen McClure Parrish. Kathleen McClure Parrish. I'm still quite fond of how that name rolls off the tongue. Kathleen is Fletcher's work crush at the Unihome offices. They're work friends, but Fletcher wants more. He's obsessed with Kathleen at the beginning of the first issue/chapter, and this obsession boils over into a breaking point for the character after he sees Kathleen with another man. Not only that, but his newfound abilities give him a glimpse into the future, and that future suggests that she and the same man will eventually become husband and wife. Kathleen's design is a mix of actresses Naomi Watts and Blake Lively. Actors are my go-to for character references. I lay her unique hairstyle at Anthony's feet since it was his decision. And as with the shadow self, Kathleen involuntarily sets Fletcher on his one-year path to finding newfound purpose. She was his only purpose, so what happens when that's stripped from him? Catelyn may come across as more of a plot device in the first 2 volumes, but without her, the story has no legs. She's an essential ingredient to Fletcher's growth. I wouldn't be too quick to assume her role in Fletcher's life is over either. Hint, hint. Next, I want to talk about Fletcher's family. The impact of family or the lack thereof on a person's life cannot be understated. I often resonate with familial strife and bonds within stories. Usually in the context of superhero stories, relatives end up becoming villains or die tragically before a superhero dons their alter ego, and family members don't wind up assuming an active role in the story. I wanted to topple that cliche with Gregory, Victoria, and Tyler Eames. There's also this universal tendency to excuse the actions of adults based on childhood trauma, leaving little room for the adult, in this case Fletcher, to take responsibility for their actions. Seasons contest this predictable, tired trope. The misfortune of Fletcher's life is his alone to fix, and mending his relationship with his family becomes a central part of his healing process in the upcoming Seasons Volume 3 fall. Next, we're going to talk about Heath. Dr. Heath Emerson is the first of 5 nature-based avatars introduced in Seasons Volume 2 Summer. Each of these 5 characters are miraculously pulled into these extraordinary circumstances in the midst of a personal emotional crisis a la Fletcher. Heath's designation is wind or air and has the ability to manipulate it as well as fly, but more than that, he represents healing and the man Fletcher could be. He's the big brother, the best friend Fletcher never had. He's more masculine, more secure in himself. Yet, like Fletcher, he's in search of why he has these abilities and of healing after his newborn son, which led to his current separation. After everything Fletcher faced in Seasons Volume 1 Spring, he needed a guide, a role model, and a fellow traveler in this crazy world. Heath, like the doctor he is, came to the rescue. Now, we meet Judith in the eye of a hurricane. This is intentionally symbolic. She is a mysterious, fragile creature representing sadness in water or the storm. Her nakedness illustrates her vulnerability and her need for shelter and warmth apart from her cold, abusive relationship. As with Heath and the other avatars, she is another echo of Fletcher's psyche and someone who has actually had it worse off than Fletcher. Fletcher sees Judith's brokenness and can relate. I'm entering spoiler territory, but Judith's story is far from over. While we've seen the last of some characters in Seasons, Judith is not one of them. I'll just leave it at that. Next, we have Baker. Baker is featured heavily in the 6th issue of the series within the pages of Seasons Volume 2 Summer. He takes on the role of fire and anger. His design resembles that of a volcano. His skin is ashen and his veins are made of lava. We discover that Baker and Heath were once close friends and went to med school together, yet they haven't seen each other in years. By helping his old friend, this further gave Heath his own set of reasons to help his new friend Fletcher, and vice versa. This also gave Heath a further set of stakes. After a bombastic brawl with Baker, we learn that Baker had set fire to his house with his wife and child still inside. This horrendous act was set in motion after Baker discovered his wife had an affair while he was on duty as a field medic overseas. This jealousy is the same jealousy that Fletcher nearly succumbed to, but eventually overcame, and Fletcher recognizes this. Baker is a reflection of who Fletcher could become and shares a lot of similarities with Fletcher's shadow self. Finally, there's Aiden and Xander. Heath, Judith, and Baker are all stepping stones to Aiden and Xander, the avatars of life and death and the earth itself. It's these 2 characters that get at the heart of Seasons Volume 2 Summer, and they are 2 of my favorite, especially Xander. Nearly identical in their earthen, leafy-laden wardrobe, Aiden is a young boy while Xander is an old man. Aiden's name begins with an A, the beginning of the English alphabet, while Xander's begins with a Z, the ending of the English alphabet. Aiden is order, the embodiment of life. Xander is chaos, the embodiment of death. They represent 2 opposing worldviews, and at the end of the 2nd volume, Fletcher is caught in between them. It's through Heath and Fletcher's intervention that Aiden and Xander's harmony is shattered, and it's at this point where Fletcher has to make a fateful choice. It's safe to deduce that every character in Seasons thus far has been created to shine a light on Fletcher and his own actions, past, present, and future. From their self-explanatory designs to their unique personalities, they serve the greater story and serve to enhance his character development. Since Seasons revolves around Fletcher, I felt it necessary to do this. Your story, however, may not require this amount of focused energy around your central character, which is understandable. Whatever type of story you're writing and however big your cast may be, the chief goal for any writer should be to make your character feel like they matter and that they're believable. Avoid creating characters that merely take up space. They have to earn it. Know the tone of your story and the tone of the world your characters will inhabit. Know the backstories for all of your characters. Get in their heads. Work with your artist on visualizing them. Then, let them speak to you. Up next, it's time to get technical. Join me in a few weeks for creating my first comic, Part 4, The Script. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.